was that those that survived had the will to know the meaning of life and to keep going. And it's kind of hard to understand. I hope that I communicated properly. But one of the concepts that Viktor Frankl talks about, when he got out of the concentration camp, he developed a full psychology, a philosophy, a branch of psychiatry called, it was called logotherapy. And what it was about was to understand what your purpose is and to get a plan and move toward it. And what he basically said is that when you have a meaning that is so powerful that if you give up your desire to live and embrace life, no matter how horrible the conditions are, you've given up the truth and the meaning of life. He says that you have to accept that life is going to have suffering. But it's what you do with that suffering, how you get up when you're in a beaten down state, that makes for you to move toward what your purpose and your meaning in life is. He said that even in the concentration camp, if you're going to have to go into those gas chambers, to be able to stand up when you go in there as a man, as you meet your death. Viktor Frankl is very, very deep, but to keep it in a very concise framework, here's what he says. He says, the past happened. It's over. You can look at it and glean something from it, maybe, but don't dwell in it. The present, if you are only living in the present without any purpose in life for your future, you're not going to have much in life. You'll be living just for things that are temporary, not more permanent. He says, so what we need to do is look at the past, get a little out of it, and while you're in the present, plan to work toward the fulfillment of your purpose, and no matter how hard life gets, never stop moving in that direction. He gave an example of a man that didn't want to live anymore. He came into his office, and the man's wife had died 2 years earlier, an elderly man, about 82 years old. And the man was very depressed, and he said to him, he had been to other psychiatrists. This was the first visit with Viktor Frankl, because his stuff is really simple. Viktor Frankl says that one of the greatest problems we have in the world is boredom, and people that just can't live with their boredom, and they think there's something wrong with them, and other psychiatrists take them back into their life to try to find out all the things that were going on in their past, when in reality, all they need to do is focus on a purpose, a worthwhile goal. So this man came to Viktor Frankl, and his wife had been deceased for a couple years, and he was very depressed, and he lost his will to live. He said he had no reason to live anymore. And Viktor Frankl asked him, why do you say that? And he said, because my wife died before me. I should have died before her. I would have rather died. You hear people talk about things like, if I could, I'd cut off my finger for my child. Well, that's kind of, I don't know if you really want to cut off your finger, but the idea is that you would sacrifice yourself for someone else, which is a very worthwhile ideal. Well, when this man told Viktor Frankl that he was depressed because he didn't die before his wife, it was so simple. Viktor Frankl said, had you died before your wife, you would have left her alone to fend for herself and have to be subjected to all the things of the world that are so difficult without you to be there by her side, supporting her and loving her. The man looked at Viktor Frankl and he said, wow. Viktor Frankl continued and he said, you did well with your life. You took care of your wife to her last dying day. You are not a failure. You're a success. Now, continue to live and be there for your relatives, your grandchildren, and your children. Get out of your depression. And the man did. It was that simple. What Viktor Frankl says is that a lot of people that are going into therapy because they're mixed up and confused and don't know what to do with themselves, they're just bored. So Viktor Frankl's logotherapy tries to help them figure out what they really like to do that has a good purpose in their life. What he says about life is going to have suffering, but you've got to accept it and move on and make something of your life. That's very much in keeping with the Christian principle of joy in suffering, is that we can go through this life and we can suffer, but yet we can still find joy even though it might not be happiness sometimes. And all you got to do to snap yourself out of a depression sometimes when you're feeling sorry for yourself that you haven't achieved what you're supposed to, and just quit looking backwards to look forward. Just look at what Jesus Christ did on that cross for us. It's a sin to not embrace what Jesus Christ did for us and to move forward. Worrying and fear, those are sins. In my preparation, I think the most serious thing that came out of this for me is that my wife and I, when we were talking about biblical references or scripture about choice, she led me to the book of Matthew, chapter 14. I think it's verse 25, 28, in that area, about Peter. Peter getting out of the boat. The basic story is that Jesus had just fed the 5,000. And he was going to go up to the mountain to pray. And he told his disciples to get into the boat and go out on the lake. In the middle of the night, the disciples all of a sudden, through the fog and the darkness, they saw something, and they thought it was a ghost, an apparition. But it wasn't. It was Jesus walking on the water toward the boat. And Peter, when he saw it, he said, "Is that you, Jesus?" And Jesus said, "Yeah." And Peter said, "If that's you, tell me to get out of the boat and walk on water like you." And Jesus simply said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and he started walking on the water as he had his eye on Jesus. He was walking in faith. And my wife believes that this Bible story is probably one of the greatest demonstrations of faith in the Bible. I think so too. But what happened was, as Peter was walking toward Jesus on the water, he had doubt. And then he started to sink. Jesus reached down, grabbed his arm, and said to him, "Ye of little faith," as he pulled him out of the water. What I'm really trying to talk about is life's choices. I'm going to read you just a whole series of famous people's quotes on choice. Dennis Waitley: there are two primary choices in life: to accept conditions as they exist, or accept the responsibility for changing them. Benjamin Franklin: they can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety, deserve neither liberty nor safety. Basically, he said those that give up essential liberties to obtain a little temporary safety, they don't deserve either liberty nor safety. John Wayne: tomorrow is the most important thing in life. Comes into us at midnight, very clean. It's perfect when it arrives and puts itself in our hands. It hopes we've learned something from yesterday. Viktor Frankl: the very best thing that I picked up when I reread Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning this weekend was, for people that believe that they're failures, for people that have too many doubts, for people that have done things wrong, they've made wrong choices, they've done bad things, they've committed crimes, they're incarcerated, they've caused divorce, they've been wrong to people. Right now, and at this very moment, if you're like that, Viktor Frankl says, I want you to imagine that you are 85 years old, no matter how young you are, and I want you to imagine what your life was, and then imagine that as of right now, today, you have a second chance to start your life over. And now, make all of the right choices. You don't need to keep making the choices because that's who you used to be. Viktor Frankl is just saying, the past is over. Start over. We all have to start over sometime. I hope that you understand a little bit about Viktor Frankl. It's a good book to read. Just read it, and then you'll understand what I'm trying to pass on to you. Here's another wonderful quote. This one's from Oprah Winfrey. Right now, you are one choice away from a new beginning, one that leads you toward becoming the fullest human being you can be. Well, that's exactly what Viktor Frankl said the way I tried to describe it to you. Here's another one. This is Viktor Frankl himself. The last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. I tried to say that, but Viktor Frankl said it better than I did. Yeah, that's the one thing that Viktor Frankl says. We do have a choice of our attitude. That's one thing that we have. Nobody else can tell us what our attitude needs to be. There are some wonderful, wonderful quotes. But I want to tell you that Napoleon Hill, this one's really simple. It is always your next move. A choice is, you have the choice. You have the freedom to make a choice. Whatever it is you want to do next, you can decide that. So I think in summary of covering choices a little bit, my message is this. If you've made wrong choices, if you've felt guilty for years because of bad choices you've made, of things you've done that were wrong, the bad decisions in life, how they've affected other people, people that you've hurt, instead of living in guilt and shame and try to figuring things out, fill yourself with good thoughts. Go to the Bible. Go to the motivational speakers that really give you these great thoughts. Get positive influences in your life. And then make up your mind. Make the choice that that's who I'm going to be from here on out.